We work so hard to improve ourselves. We work so hard to be able to stand in our essence and presence and body fully. And when your family rejects that, or when they make fun of that, or when they ignore that and don't ask questions about your life, it hurts. It really does hurt. Welcome to A Year Without Fear, the podcast where we stop letting fear make our decisions and start building the creative lives we actually want. I'm your host, Bethany Morris, and over the next year, I'm going to take you along with me as I write a novel, attempt to turn content creation into my full-time career, and confront my deepest, darkest fears. Welcome back to another episode of A Year Without Fear. I'm your host, Bethany Morris, and I'm a somatic and trauma-informed coach who believes that your greatest life lies on the other side of facing your fears. And today we're talking about the fear of disappointing your family during the holidays. Okay, let's get right into it. We're going to discuss 3 ways in which the fear might show up. Then we are going to get into some tips as to how to combat those fears. Then we're going to move into the homework section, do a quick life update, and then we'll be finished with this episode. Okay, let's get started. The first fear we're going to talk about is the fear of conflict. So standing up to your family during the holidays can be very difficult. It can be hard to claim your new identity when your family sees you a certain way. So, for example, your family could have always seen you as the wild child or as the quiet child or the super emotional child, emo child. And for me personally, I was always seen as the good girl. And I feel like that has really taken a toll on my adult life. It's something that I'm still unlearning how to be. I feel like the good girl trope shows up in my romantic relationships a lot. I find myself wanting to portray myself as the cool girl where nothing bothers me. You know, you can treat me however, you can say whatever you want to me, and I'll still be super cool. I'll still be super chill and not bring anything up because I personally am super conflict averse. When I was growing up, I feel like any sort of conflict was avoided in my household. So I feel like even if somebody had an issue with somebody else, it was always just kind of under the surface, and it would allow for resentment to build up for a long time. And then eventually it would all kind of bubble over and explode. And I think that I came to fear the explosion or the eventual explosion that took place in my household. I'm very wary of conflict still to this day, but it is something that I have been working on. It's something that takes a lot of practice. It's something that has taken a lot of therapy, but it has been so worth it because I'm able to finally express myself fully. I'm able to use my voice. I'm able to find myself through the words that I express. Expressing yourself, especially to people that you have known for a really long time and who know you as a certain way or project their own feelings onto you or their own vision of yourself onto you. It can be really hard to stand up to that and really hard to confront that in a way that is both compassionate and understanding while also being firm. I would also say that sometimes firmness can feel like we're being mean or we're being unfair to our families, but really you have to be able to hold that fear of being mean or being perceived as mean so you can protect your own personal peace. The second fear is the fear that your family won't accept you for who you are. We work so hard to improve ourselves. We work so hard to be able to stand in our essence and presence and body fully. And when your family rejects that, or when they make fun of that, or when they ignore that and don't ask questions about your life, it hurts. It really does hurt. It feels like even though you've done the work on yourself to improve, that you'll never be enough. And I think it's important to recognize that and to be able to hold that. And I think it also hurts because you are still in the process of developing your new identity. You're still in the process of finding yourself in this phase or this era of your life. You're still kind of growing into the you who you're supposed to be. So when your family doesn't accept that, when your family doesn't recognize the work that been doing, it not only stings, but it's just disappointing because you want the people who have known you for the longest, you want the people who supposedly love you no matter what to be able to accept the new you. And when they don't do that, it can be devastating. Predisposed. We are predisposed as humans to want to connect with each other. We're prone to wanting to fit in. And when we break the mold and when we have courage to break the mold, it feels like we should be rewarded for that. But a lot of times you'll have the opposite effect on your family. And it's important to know that that's their problem. It's not your problem. Your only job in life is to rediscover who you are again and again and again until you feel comfortable within yourself. And you're going to have eras where you're questioning your identity. You're going to have eras where you're shedding your identity. You're going to have eras when you're stepping into a new identity. And all of that is messy and imperfect. But just know that that's the best part of life is the experimenting, the creativity that you get to have when you are stepping into a new identity. And I think the final fear related to the fear of disappointing your family is the fear of having to maintain your boundaries when you start confronting your family, when you start sticking up for yourself, when you start embodying the version of you that feels true and feels right, you're going to have to practice holding those boundaries. And if you're anything like me, you haven't held boundaries for most of your life and you have allowed yourself to be walked over, you have allowed yourself to be diminished, you have allowed yourself to just be smaller in order to be accepted. And it's important that every single time that you feel the urge to shrink yourself and make yourself smaller or not use your voice, that you tap into the version of who you want to become and also who you are. I think it's important to recognize and know that who you are presently, who you are currently is enough. You don't have to wait for a future version of you to stick up for yourself. You don't have to wait for a future version of you to be able to hold and maintain your boundaries. You don't have to wait. You can just do it now. And it's going to be scary, of course, but the more you practice maintaining your boundaries, the easier it'll be. And the more that you practice maintaining your boundaries, the more you can sort of train people to expect that this is the way you want to be treated now. This is the way you deserve to be treated. In my own life, my dad has a habit of speaking for me and assuming that he knows what I'm thinking and that we're both thinking the same thing. And I think that a lot of times, not all the times, but a lot of times he views me as a extension of himself and not somebody with my own thoughts and feelings and independence. So even when it's hard to maintain that boundary with him, I know that I have to because I'm so tired of playing it small. I'm so tired of people speaking for me. I'm tired of diminishing myself and shrinking myself in order to make other people comfortable. So maintaining your boundaries is going to make people uncomfortable. And that's something that you have to be able to hold the feeling of disappointing someone. But you have to recognize at the same time that that disappointment is because your family is projecting an identity onto you and that that's not the real you. The real you is someone who can firmly hold their boundaries with respect, with compassion, with understanding, but with firmness and with grace as well. Maintaining your boundaries means that the real you has finally emerged or has finally started to emerge. Now we're going to move on to the tips. So the first tip I have for you is to practice regulating through conflict. So if you're going to your family's house for the holidays, instead of completely holding all these boundaries around who you are and your new identity, which is of course great if you have the confidence to do that, then do it. But if you are still working on gaining that confidence, it's okay to start small. It's okay to practice saying, actually, in my case, actually, dad, that's not what I think. I think X, Y, and Z. And I would appreciate it if you wouldn't speak for me anymore. And for more scripts, you can check out the boundaries video that I posted a couple weeks ago. I also think that when you're expressing yourself, it's really, really, really important to give yourself compassion and also know that you don't have to respond right then and there. It's totally okay to take a beat and return to the conversation when your nervous system is more regulated. So, personally, I have a freeze response with conflict. My brain just like overloads and I have a hard time thinking. My throat tightens, my heart rate increases, and I have a really hard time articulating my thoughts. It's kind of that feeling of like when someone's mean to you and you don't think of a perfect comeback until later on. It's that feeling, right? But it is okay to take a beat and to say, hey, I need a minute. I'm feeling really overwhelmed right now. I would like to come back to this conversation in 15, 20 minutes or whenever you would like to come back to the conversation. And when you do that, you're giving yourself a chance to collect your thoughts. You're giving yourself a chance to come at the situation or the conflict with compassion, with respect, and in a way that is not further agitating the situation, which is really important. And the next tip that I have is to practice taking up space. I had a friend of mine who, every single time that she talked about her boyfriend or her relationship, she would physically make herself smaller. She would collapse into herself. And it's not something that she noticed at all. It's something that was subconscious. And when I pointed it out to her, her whole demeanor and outlook on that relationship changed. She realized that she was indeed making herself smaller and allowing herself to not be heard. And I want to also recognize that it's so hard to stand up for yourself in a relationship. It's something that I'm still working on. We're not perfect, but it is something to practice and it's something to be able to get good at. It's just important in general as well to take up space, not just in the dynamic of the holiday season and spending that with your family, but also in business and friendships and any sort of situation where you have to command other people's attention. Because when you take up space, you're giving yourself permission to fully embody the new version of yourself, which is, as I was talking about earlier, the most important thing that we can do. The third tip I have is to debrief with yourself after a family gathering during the holidays. We can't make changes until we recognize patterns within ourselves, which is why it's so important to debrief with ourselves afterwards and see where we succeeded and where we might need a little bit of work. So some prompts for that are: number 1, what did I perform versus what was authentic? Number 2, where did I disappoint them? How do I feel about that? 3, where did they disappoint me? What does that tell me? And 4, what do I need to do differently next time, if there is a next time? And again, this is so important because this is how you learn to recognize your own patterns and change them so you can, again, be the best version of yourself that you can be. Okay, moving on to the homework for today. So I want you to do a projection versus reality exercise. And what I mean by projection versus reality is I want you to write down what your family thinks about you versus what you know to be the real you. So, for example, this week, I want you to finish the following prompts. Number 1, my family thinks that I'm blank, but I'm actually blank. The version of me I perform during the holidays is blank, but the real me is blank. And you don't have to share this with anyone. It's just sort of a reflection exercise, but it is important to, again, recognize those patterns and recognize that someone's projection of your identity is not reality, even though in the moment it can feel like that. In the moment when we feel smaller, we feel uncomfortable with conflict, it can feel like that is still our identity, even though we know deep down that it's no longer our identity. Okay, now we're going to move on to a really quick life update. Let's see. I am over 10K words into my novel, which is super exciting. I am almost finished with Act One, which is really cool. I'm excited to continue working on it. I am nervous about starting the second act because I don't have as clear of a vision as to how all of the different storylines are going to weave together, but I'm trying to trust the process. I'm trying to trust myself and know that A, it's a first draft and that I can improve later, but B, that I do know what I'm doing and that if I listen to my intuition, I can figure it out along the way. So I think I mentioned this last week. I started pole dancing, which is also super exciting. It has been great exercise, although I'm very, very bruised all over my body. And I wanted to make it a New Year's resolution that I would be able to climb the pole in 2026. But I actually did that a couple days ago. So I'm super proud of myself. I'm ready to continue using pole dancing as a form of exercise and self expression. And I can't wait until I get better at it. But at the same time, I recognize and I'm still trying to recognize that the journey is the destination and learning along the way and building up our self esteem and confidence and sense of identity is the real work. It's the real destination, not the end goal that you might have. And then finally, a quick GLP-1 update. I have noticed that I don't have any emotions around food anymore, which is really strange because I used food as a coping mechanism for so long to myself whenever I got an intense emotion, primarily sadness or depression, I would say, but also anxiety, also this need of having to reward myself constantly. So it's been really interesting to have that go away. And I'm still in the process of trying to figure out how to replace the habit of eating whenever I feel an intense emotion with other constructive habits. So if you have any tips, please leave them down below. And that brings us to the end of the episode. Today, we talked about the fear of disappointing your family during the holidays and 3 fears related to that, which were the fear of conflict, the fear that your family won't accept you, and the fear of maintaining your boundaries around your family. We also discussed 3 tips to maintain and hold your boundaries around your family during the holidays. And of course, we had some homework. Thank you so much, truly, for watching, for listening. I am so grateful to each and every one of you. I hope you have a good holiday season. I hope you have a holiday season where you can maintain your boundaries with your family. I'll see you next week.